Hello and welcome to Arts and Entertainment.
With Chris and Randall.
I'm Chris.
I'm Randall.
And welcome to the show. We're continuing on again from our exploration of visual art. The last episode, we were dealing with Impressionism, its precursors, and then Impressionism. And now we're going to move forward into modernism and the legacy of Impressionism leading into modernism. Randall, what's the title of the show again? The Road to Modernism?
I think, we'll call it The Road to Modernism.
And trust me, we are working to something even bigger than that. But we got to lay down the groundwork before we can get to the big part. That's how we like to do visual art stories. There is always a mystery. There's always a backstory. There's a surprise. So we want you to follow along knowing that, I promise, we're not just giving you art history 101. We're digging a little bit deeper. But before we go any further, as always, please like, share, subscribe, comment. We really want to hear what you have to say. Randall, what's a pretty good way to reach us?
Well, first of all, check out the website, chrisandrandall.com. There's various ways to enjoy the show from there. And if you want to communicate with us, our Facebook page is pretty good, Arts and Entertainment with Chris and Randall.
We really want to hear what you have to say. It helps dictate the show. Notice what I said here, because I just realized, Randall, some people are listening to this on the podcast and they're going, okay, what are we going to do? These are paintings. So two things. First off, I will describe everything I'm looking at. And second of all, when you go to our website, you will see a link to the gallery for this episode, right, Randall?
Yeah, so like on the last episode, we did our first slide heavy show last episode, and all the slides should be up on our website. You can download them.
And normally wherever the podcast is a link to the website, correct?
Right. And also, if you just watch the video version, like on YouTube or Facebook, you should see the slides anyway. But
well, absolutely. I'm just saying for those of you listening right now at home or in your car or at office or wherever the heck it is that you listen to podcasts, I just want you to be able to have access to these things. All right. Well, without further ado, Randall, just take us through. Why don't we start?
All right. Well, last episode, I was talking about the Impressionists, and a lot of people consider the Impressionists to the very start of modernism, modern art, the aesthetic of modernism and art, and for good reason. Okay, so I think I explained to you, right, Chris, in 1863, Napoleon III, the Salon des Refusés, which was the like an alternative. Well, there was a big art show in Paris in the 1800s where the fine artists in Paris, the Paris Institute of Arts, would allow certain artists to display. There was a judging panel, and most of the art they approved had to be photorealistic, shall we say. It had to be a certain way. There was like a mainstream art in mid 1800s Europe, and like a lot of times in history. Do you remember, Chris, when I was in high school, there was this thing called alternative music?
Yes.
Do you remember?
I think it came into vogue sometime in the late 80s, early 90s.
So why was there alternative music? It's because the popular music of that time, the mainstream music, shall we say, it was so similar, so cookie cutter that it was very difficult for musicians, for the industry to break out of a straitjacket. All the bands were like hair bands, right?
It was either hair bands or it was long established bands from the 70s or 60s. So it's like, how do I make a song that doesn't sound like Fleetwood Mac or Led Zeppelin or the Rolling Stones? Well, whatever that would be would fall out of the academy of traditional sounding rock into something completely with different instruments, different harmonies, different syncopations, different rhythms, a different sense of self.
Right, but it was very difficult to break out of that mainstream, shall we say, mode of making music without some sort of space for it, right? They had to create a space for it. So that's
originally it started out on college radio stations, but became so popular they wanted to find a way of getting it into the mainstream.
And eventually there was a genre, they just called it alternative, right, Chris?
I was actually a disc jockey in college when that form actually began. So
So do
I
you
was at
remember like they were literally just calling it alternative music? I mean, that was the name of
Well,
the
because
genre.
bands like U2 and REM were originally bands that we would label as, new wave, then alternative, but REM and U2 were also bands that even if they didn't, or the Talking Heads, even if they didn't sound like, Jethro Tull or Genesis, they weren't so obscure that they couldn't fill out stadiums.
Right. And well, listen, I think in 1863 this is exactly what happens in Paris. So you have this big art show every year that is very hard to get into, and if you don't paint a certain style, you're not getting in. And the Impressionists come along, led by Camille Pissarro, and they're, I think, and I already made the case last episode, if you care to watch or listen, I think that the Impressionists are really inspired by the camera, and they're going outside and they're trying to paint what they see, and they're trying to capture light and color. And here, I'll advance some slides so I could. Let's see. I'll go back, but but do you remember? Okay, so this is
It's
Monet
Monet.
Impressions
It's
Sun.
a sunset over a river, sunrise, sorry, over a river. It's very foggy. It's gray. You can kind of make out clouds, water, and some distant sail ships and the sun.
This is one of the first Impressionist paintings, and I think that they're really inspired by trying to capture the world as the camera sees it, as it is. I mean, so I can just imagine that all the Impressionist painters, their work isn't very detailed. It's not as detailed and photorealistic as, say, like the Delacroix works, as Delacroix from the if you want to look up some very popular works of that period, you can look up Delacroix, Eugene Delacroix, and they're not as detailed, but they're trying to capture light, they're trying to capture color in a more realistic way. Okay, they're literally going outside and painting, whereas before people were painting inside. And so I could see them, the Impressionists, going to the powers that be and saying that, yeah, everybody's rejecting our paintings, but they're more realistic than these other paintings. Okay, so they have an argument. They have a case to be made, but this is not a case for modernism. They're not saying that what will eventually become modernism. They're not making the argument that we're looking at the world in a different way. We're trying to present the world different way. We're presenting different ways of seeing the world. I don't think they are. Okay, but so what they're doing instead is they're doing exactly what painters have always done in Europe, which is they're trying to represent the world realistically. And so they have this great case, and so they open up, and because of the Salon, and so Napoleon hears this, he opens up the Salon des Refusés and the Salon of the Salon of Rejects, and so people are able to see these paintings. Okay, and by the way, if you didn't get your painting into the Salon, you weren't going to work, you weren't going to sell your paintings. So it was they had a stranglehold. So I think that what the Salon does is the Salon des Refusés does is it opens up like an alternative space for alternative works of art. Okay, and so I don't think that the Impressionists are like really kickstarting modernism. But they open the door. Okay, now I want to show some, and so what'll happen is they open the door, and we're gonna go through this episode, but we eventually get to a moment where I think the door to modernism opens wide. It fully opens. It's the abstract moment. And let me just before we get there though, I want to look at some precursors. So you see on your screen, what do you see on your screen right now, Chris?
Looks like a mosaic, Islamic mosaic dome.
Right.
Looks like it has gold filament. I cannot remember the word for the language, but it's written in, I believe, Aramaic. It has certain patterns that I associate with Islamic culture.
Right. So
Very geometrical.
Right. So there are a lot of precursors to abstract art. Okay, which is what I'm trying to get to. But I think I made the argument in the last episode, Chris, that it's very difficult. It was very difficult for us humans to get to abstract art. This idea that we're going to depict with art nothing, right? It's like you're gonna make a painting of nothing. You're gonna make a sculpture that's nothing. You know, it only exists on the canvas. It's like that's a road that was very difficult for us to get to as humans. And in the Islam and some people would say there's a lot of, like, you know, precursors to abstract art and other cultures,
Well,
but
Islamic art, I think, is what you're heading, much like Judaism, because they're the two other Arab,
Arabic,
no, Abrahamic, thank you.
Abrahamic. Okay.
So in Judaism and in Islam, you're not allowed to draw God. So a mosque is a temple, and therefore, if you were to do any, unlike, say, a Christian temple, you would never have any drawings of Allah or even Muhammad.
I think, isn't that the case also in Christianity, but they just weren't very
No, you can draw
strict
God
about it?
in Christianity. The Council of Nicaea decided that was okay.
But haven't there been times in Christianity's history where
certain Christian sects don't believe? You are correct. Certain Christian sects don't, but the Catholic Church, which the majority of Christianity has been the dominant church of Christianity, has, you know, done the opposite. They have dedicated some of the greatest painters in history to depicting the saints and God.
Okay, but here's what I find interesting, right, is that in the Islamic world, yeah, so they have, you know, because of their religion, they have this prohibition against figurative art, basically.
Yes.
Let's just say. And so this is the interior of the Dome of the Rock of the Mosque of Omar, I think, in the year 1022. And
it would be within about the first 100 years of Islam.
And you could see that, I mean, this doesn't look like a Jackson Pollock, right? This doesn't look like a Kandinsky. What this is what you'll see in a lot of the Islamic art.
It reminds me almost of a Paisley pattern, even though it's slightly different.
Right, it's almost like a textile, isn't it?
Yes.
So what you'll see in a lot of Islamic art are repeating patterns. And you can see the words are written in a highly stylized format. I mean, it's beautiful, but it's not the kind of abstract expression, shall we say, that you'll see humanity come to later on. Okay?
Yeah, the geometrical patterns are consistent, just about. There's very little variation, some, but not much.
Right. There's not much expression here, except that they're expressing beauty, maybe the love of God, you know, the love of God's orderly universe, you know. Okay, let's go on. So this is from 1100. This is, I believe, this is a Syrian jar. Okay, and you can see it's a similar concept.
Again, it's a blue urn with black inking of circles and a pattern. It's not complete, but it's about 90% complete of black and blue, and it looks almost illustrated.
When I looked for these photos, I tried to find actual photos of actual artifacts, you know, and I may have made mistakes, I don't know, but I believe this is a jar from the 1100s. I don't know if it's been repainted at some point. Okay, let's go on. Okay, it's
a Japanese chalk, right? It's because it's gray and white.
Yeah, I think it's watercolors.
Watercolor, is it? Sorry, it's watercolor. It's the outline of a man with a dark robe and baggy pants, opened up for his chest exposed, and you can kind of see the outline of a beard and hair. It's almost indistinct. It's almost like a clouded version, obscured.
Do you remember this is from the 1100s. Japan. Do you remember the in the last show we talked about the ink blots?
Yes.
Turner, his ink blots? Mm-hmm. So this is a similar concept. These Japanese monks, they came up with this concept, you know, they're Buddhists, and they came up with this concept that they would splash ink blots on a page, okay? And then they would try to make them into something.
And so it's a lot of hues. It's a lot of texture and tone. There is only really two colors, the grayishness of the paper and the grayish blackishness of the ink. So everything is just contrasting shades of black and gray and brown.
Right. So this is a similar concept. They just took an ink blot and they tried to make it into figurative art.
You see this sometimes in old comic books too.
This is another similar concept. This is from 1349. This is the left. I'll just describe this. The left is like it's like a gnarled tree branch, but it's very ink blotty. I think this comes from an ink blot. But on the right, you see like a perfect circle, probably drawn with a compass, perhaps. And the idea, this is like a very Buddhist Zen kind of mystical like depiction of the chaos of the universe and the harmony of Zen. Okay, the harmony of Buddhism, of Buddhist thought. I mean that. But you can see like how they're not getting close to abstract expression, okay? But it's sort of a precursor. But you see, isn't it very similar to Turner's ink blot, though, isn't it, Chris?
Yes, I can definitely see that.
Here's another 1436. This is from what do you see, Chris?
It's again another dome. Again, it is a pattern of a bluish dome with white geometric patterns, almost star-like patterns on the top of the dome, and again a language of pattern on the bottom, and in between mosaic tiles to separate with little flecks of orange and green, very indiscernible, some white, some black. But again, very geometric. Every side of it looks almost identical to the other side.
And I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe the row on the bottom, it looks like it could be abstract expressionism. I believe it's stylized text.
Yes, that's what it looks like to me. It looks like it would be a very challenging puzzle because as many pieces would look alike.
Now this is from 1603. This is a mosque. What do you see, Chris?
Again, it's a dome, and in that sense, it definitely reminds me of Christian churches, in that you have a vaulted ceiling, but the difference being at the top of the ceiling, it is definitely like a paisley pattern of gold and black leaf-like shapes with lots of gold filament, moving down to another pattern of something similar, but buttressed with these two lines. And then further down at the very bottom, it almost looks like figures of people made, it's the silhouettes of people almost with, again, a Paisley-esque pattern of what looks like what could be little flowers in gold in a black and blue background.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like they could be silhouettes of people, but I believe that on closer inspection, you'll see that it.
Oh, it's just a gestalt. You're right.
But yeah, so there's, you can see that there's no figures, but it's mostly
there's a lot going on because there's so many very, very different backgrounds, but it's never overwhelming because everything is divided. You can tell that whoever designed this really understood balance and perspective.
And you can see that the Islamic world artists, the Muslim world artists, they are very concerned with repeating patterns. I mean, that's, from in a religious context, you can definitely see why that might be the case, right? Because it gives you a sense of order to the universe.
Yeah, I mean, structurally speaking, it could have been very busy and overwhelming, but because everything there seems to be, was that the golden? Anyway, seems to be some very clean pattern design choices being made that keeps everything from being overwhelming.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying there's no expression, there's no emotional expression in these works. It's just
it has a scientific elegance.
Yeah, well, they're all trying to express the same thing, right? They're all made for the glory of God, right? And the Islamic world, I don't believe had a mature art market where middle class people.
I do want to point out that at this period in history, while Europe is going through the Middle Ages, that is not the case for Muslim countries. Islam was algebra, science, a very advanced society. And certainly this level of technique and perspective definitely reveals a greater understanding of spatial relations and dimensionality, proportionality than its European equivalent in the 9th and 10th centuries or 11th centuries.
Yeah, but I would argue from an aesthetic standpoint, they're still not quite getting to a place where they're into abstract expression.
Yeah, it's more decorative than anything else.
Right. Okay, let's go to this is another one from 1619. What do you see?
Again, patterns vaulting, gray, blue, turquoise, which is a very joyous color. And again, though, it does to me look like the more as architecture than art, and I mean that as a compliment, almost like a shell.
I love this. I love this look though. But this, you see all the depressions in the arch,
indentations.
That's common in some of these structures. Okay, this is a page from a book, a religious text, an Islamic religious text. You can see the aesthetic continues into their books. What do you see?
Yeah, then here is again, it's bordered of white flowers in a blue background, and then inside the frame, it looks like brown woodcuts, almost like a log, circular, and then on the bottom a square bisected by some writing in black and brown, and then above it looks like something of an illustration or writing with again some leaves.
Okay, so this is from 1698. You can see like the first slide I showed you was like from around 1000. So this is like 700 years later. There still hasn't been much advancement in terms of aesthetics. There's still
it could have come out 30 years later. You would never know.
Right. Okay, now let's go to Africa. So I want to bring these up too because later on you'll see these works are highly influential in Europe. So in Africa for who knows how long, hundreds of years, there was a tradition of carving these wooden sculptures, and they were highly influential to artists like Picasso. I mean, you can see the influence.
You can see how the cubists are. So we're looking here at a wood, a mahogany wood, I would imagine, sculpture of a tribesman looking off with a quizzical expression in his face, wearing a decorative cap of his tribe. It is all brown except for the whites of his eyes, with a very large black pupils, and
see
the piece of jewelry, and he's sitting in what we in America used to call Indian style, with your legs crossed.
This is like the 1800s, perhaps. These works are very influential in Europe, as we'll see. So there's a few more. Here's another one.
It's interesting. I was about to say that about the last piece, but I will say about this one, which is again a man standing. Looks like a bronze piece almost, of a man standing, holding something above his head, which would have been common for that period of history for moving things around. But the hands are very elongated. The face is elongated. There are no strict rules of proportionality. Instead of making everything to scale, the oversized face, the oversized hands are to draw focus away from other parts of the figure.
I do find it interesting.
Which you do see actually in Picasso as well.
Yeah, and I do find it interesting that there's another one. I do find it interesting in European art and you see it starting, I would say, in Egypt. In European art, they're really concerned with trying to make the human form photorealistic, and you don't see that in a lot of other cultures. Like look at this woman, Chris.
Again, the face is elongated. The hands are actually proportional, but the waist to the shoulders there's nothing. Even the hips, every part of the anatomy is it has no bearing in reality, which doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just wherever things are biggest, that's where your attention goes to. So when you look at this, you're less likely to look at her waist and more likely to look at the broadness of her shoulders or her face, which is just larger than her face is almost half of her chest.
Well, these are depictions of the human body that are more emotional and subconscious than they are realistic. And that's the kind of thing that the Europeans will come to accept in time, especially with work like Freud, right?
Yes.
The subconscious. Let's see. Okay, so we're gonna go to 1861, back to Europe. This is a painting by Whistler.
Whistler.
And I just want to show you this because this is the kind of painting that Whistler. I'm going to start talking about Whistler in a second. This is the kind of painting that Whistler was making. Most of his paintings in 1861 in the mid 1800s. But what happens is he does this painting. What do you see here, Chris?
Well, now this is fascinating because what you first showed, for those of you who I didn't get a chance, was just a very figurative work of a young woman in a white dress, probably something he had been commissioned to do, very realistic. The face, the anatomy, the texture of the clothing. It is exactly like a photograph. It would take no time for me to hire a model, a seamstress, a wardrobe designer, and literally replicate the entire thing, and you wouldn't even notice much of a difference. Right. But then you switch on to the next piece by Whistler, which comes, almost 15 years later. And
yeah, this is 1875.
It almost looks like a combat photo. You know, when you see photos of shelling, but you don't. I'm sorry, that is what's going on in the world.
Well, good eye. This is called Nocturne in black and gold. A nocturne was a type of painting where you tried to paint something at night, and it's called Nocturne in black and gold, the falling rocket. So it's supposed to be...
I'm exactly right.
What you're exactly right. It's supposed to be fireworks. Yep.
It's fireworks. You can contrasting gold with black.
The reason I bring this up is because now Whistler, as you can see by the first painting, the woman in white, Whistler is not one of these modernist painters. Okay, he's not Picasso. Okay, he's just trying to. He's almost like an impressionist, although a lot of people don't consider him an impressionist. He's just trying to paint what he sees.
But it's a very thin line at this point between naturalism and impressionism, or even expressionism. Because even though this is something you and I have been witnessing, will witness, there is something quite surreal and unrealistic simultaneously.
So what happened?
So clear and emotive.
Yes, but what happens is Whistler paints this, and in 1877, a critic, Ruskin,
John Maynard Ruskin,
right? He writes a criticism of this painting in like some sort of publication he writes, and let's see. I'll read you one of those sentences. I have seen and heard much of Cockney impudence before now, but never expected to hear a coxcomb ask 200 guineas for flinging a pot of paint in the public's face.
Just to frame this, art critics in this period in history were the equivalent of film critics today. You know, people would watch Siskel and Ebert or whoever your favorite film critic. They carried a lot of weight. Even if you yourself were never going to buy this work, you might go see it. You might also remember that the people who bought this work were buying this as a statement of good taste as much as an investment. So when somebody like a Ruskin gives the imprimatur that this is good, it has value and it speaks well of you. If he says it's bad, it's almost like being banished.
Right. Well, I think in the internet era, like, critics aren't as important, it seems like. But yeah, but back then, and even up till like Siskel.
Well, then it's like the Rotten Tomatoes. Ruskin was the art critics of that day were like the Rotten Tomatoes of today.
Right, right. But you can even see Rotten
Tomatoes. Trying to stay hip with you, internet kids.
But you can even see stuff like Rotten Tomatoes. It's like a bunch of critics, right? It's like they're playing numbers and it's statistics, but this in this era, like, one critic could sink you, and which is what happened. So Ruskin wrote this review of this painting, and he called Whistler a coxcomb, which I think is a reference to a jester's cap, and it destroyed Whistler's career.
That would be what we would call in the mid-19th century a sick burn.
Thanks for translating for the kids out there, Chris.
Yeah.
So
I feel like John Green.
And, another funny thing about Ruskin's writings is, let's see, I wish I'd written this down. The publication, it had a Latin title, Fors Clavigera, but that was like the main title. There's like a subtitle that was like dispatches for the working man or something like that. So it's like he's almost like a modern conservative critic where he's like making fun of the the rich and the intellectuals, and I mean it goes way back, right?
Yes.
So he ruins Whistler's career, and then Whistler sued him for libel, and then he won the case. I think there was a jury, and the jury ruled in Whistler's favor. They found in Whistler's favor, but then the judge awarded Whistler in damages like $1.
You may have won the battle, but you lost the war.
Right. And then Whistler, let's see, in 1878, the trial was in 1878, and then later on Whistler published
I'm sorry, I gotta say, wouldn't it be great today if filmmakers could sue the critics for giving them a bad review?
I know, I would love that.
Yeah.
You can go online and read the transcript. Maybe I'll link to it. But what happened was, so Whistler was basically ruined, but he published the transcript. Whistler put out a book of like just a collection of letters, but he put the transcript of the trial in there too. That reminds me a lot of Lenny Bruce, right? Who was who was harassed by the press, and he was a stand-up, if you don't know, and he would, after he started being harassed by the powers that be, arrested, he would go on stage and read transcripts of his trial. And no, it wasn't funny. A little bit maybe, I don't know. Okay, so let's see what else do we got here. Okay, this is in 1878. No, I just want to show you, this is a little tidbit.
Okay, so those of you, this is a black and white. I do think it might be charcoal, of a large face, and it's just a disembodied face in the sky looking down on a sailboat in a water, and you also see some birds over the water.
Yeah, this is 1878. De Leon Redon.
Yes.
Guardian Spirit of the Waters. I like it because it's an unusual work from that era. I mean, you can see
it's somewhat surreal because instead of drawing a full figurative body like you might have expected, it's just a face, but not even a face in the full frame perspective. It's actually a face in profile, and the face is again so big, it's larger than the boat. It's larger than the water.
Right.
This takes up 3/4 of the painting.
Right, and you can see
the drawing.
This is an illustration, probably charcoal, but you can see that it's not like Whistler's painting. Whistler's painting, it was meant to be sold. It was made, with all the skill of the time, all the paint of the time, to be high end. But it looks like I don't know. You said it, Chris. I mean, it looks like war. It looks like fireworks. I mean,
this looks like a comic book or cartoon. Even the face itself is disproportionate. The eye is bigger than the nose.
Right. This work was not meant for a mass audience, is what I'm saying. And Whistler's work was, which is where he ran into problems.
This would be something more appropriate to a children's book.
Yes. Okay, now.
Seurat. This, for you guys who don't know, is a Sunday. I can never do this. On la Grande Jetée. How would you pronounce that?
Yeah.
Go Google Sunday in the Park with George. This will be what you'll see, even though it's not. Or Sunday
Sunday on the La Grande Jetée.
That I have seen some pointillist work of Seurat. I don't know if I've seen this one because I forgot where this one hangs, but it is people in a park on a Sunday, relaxing on the ground, walking around the park, looking at the boats on the water. It is made up of these teeny little dots. And if you went to a museum, you would see, in some sense, it's like little pixels, And
very similar to pixels.
All these little pixels that when you step back, create this big image. Man, he would have done so well in the 90s with malls.
So this is
a Seurat machine.
Probably,
that you could print out on your old, 1993 Dell.
Well, it looks like pixel art from computers.
90s pixel art.
I just want to say a few years before this, in 1881, Paul Gauguin, who is not that big yet, but he's another fine artist, he decides to move to Tahiti because he wanted to escape European civilization and everything that is artificial and conventional. So we are at a time when things are really starting to heat up. You know, you got the Salon de Refusés, and things are getting very commercial in art, and they're very regimented. We have this alternative art scene that's starting to spring up, but you see artists like Gauguin is like, you know, it's still not alternative enough, and he's going to leave. So there's still very much a
Well, Gauguin
straitjacket.
is you're right. If Gauguin is in protest because he doesn't even think the environment, this Seurat is actually staying in that environment and trying to find a way of expressing that.
Right. So Seurat is one of the geniuses of the art because he's using this color science, this newly emerging color science, to try to influence his art. Um, he's thinking that a painter can use color to create like a counterpoint, like a musician would in a musical piece. Okay, so
This
that's part of.
is a period in history, in European history, in American history as well, where scientific principles are being applied to everything, including non-scientific things like art. So this, unlike when we were looking at the mosque work, there was a certain sense of deliberate engineering, but it was from a different culture. But here, it's not so much engineering as much as coming up with codified aesthetic principles and figuring out what are the axioms that create certain kinds of effects. It's not just in other ones it's quite literally a scientific, it's not science for science sake. It is really trying to find some fundamental rules of art that can be utilized by all.
Right. So I talked about this a little bit in the last episode, where painters are trying to come up with theories of expression that have nothing to do with figures.
Mhm.
So Seurat's doing that too here, and he's trying to use science, right? So he invents this language he calls, like, he may have called it chromoluminarism or divisionism. And I'll just give you a taste of some of the things he thought. He thought that you could depict gaiety, the emotion of gaiety, by the domination of luminous hues. So, a bright painting, say, the predominance of warm colors, lines going up. Calm is achieved through a balance of light and dark, the balance of warm and cold colors. You can see in this
And
painting.
here, he is replicating what sun and shade look like. So when you look at the bottom quarter of the half of the page, and slightly even to the right-hand corner, where the sun is clearly being obscured by trees, the colors are darker. And then as you get out of the tree line to where people are standing in the sun, they have umbrellas. So again, you have these contrasts of where the shadows fall and where there are no shadows and everything is simply bright, and there's various gradations.
Right. So, um, yeah. So he's trying to use science to inform his art, and so now that the Salon de Refuses is open up, we've got we've got this explosion of experimentation, and the critics come in and they name a lot of these movements. Okay, a lot of these movements spring up, and the critics name. So, like, we have something called Symbolism in 1886 is coined. 1888, Cloisonnism. I think I'm saying that right. Here's another Seurat in 1886. Okay, now look at this one. This
Now, this
is
is an interesting one because he's paying homage to himself because there's
right.
three models, probably in his gallery, naked. And then on the left-hand corner is the actual painting again of Le Grand Jeté. And it draws a fascinating contrast because here he's put a painting of his own work, which is not uncommon for visual artists, but you can see the difference between what the figures look like in his reference to Le Grand Jeté versus what the models look like in the altogether, as we like to say.
I like this one because it shows how playful
Good use of hand
things are.
placement, by the way.
Yeah. All right, let's go on to okay. So this is another Seurat. This is 1887. It's
Another
another
famous one,
sideshow.
the Circus, and this is interesting too because it is for those of you who cannot see, it is like a show where people are in the audience watching musicians play. All of them seem to be playing a trombone. You can kind of make out in the background the decorative artwork of where they're performing and the lights. But it's again, you cannot really make out their faces. The figures are clear, the proportionality is clear, but the expressions, the faces, it looks just like when you have a lens on a camera. It just looks very out of focus. It hasn't hit focus yet.
Okay, let's go on. Let's see. Okay, so here's a Van Gogh. I'm sure you've heard of Van Gogh, right, Chris?
That
It's
is a
1887.
self-portrait by Van Gogh. Not actually too dissimilar to Seurat, as opposed to little points. You see little brush strokes, and every little brush stroke, like pieces of a puzzle, create this overall textural composition of Van Gogh. It features the red and orange of his hair and his beard, the yellow filament of his eyes, kind of a reddish hueish brown of his jacket. And then the background is this mixture of various colors that create almost like just an obscured area so that his face, more than even his clothes, stand out. It's the focal point.
Yeah, and you can see here that Van Gogh is trying his hand at pointillism. Pointillism was highly influential. Everybody tried a lot of artists, almost all of them probably tried their hand at it at some point. Even Camille Pizarro tries his hand at pointillism for a while. Pizarro was like the guy that invented Impressionism, basically. Because I think, and I'll just say a couple things. Like, I think that they think that.
Well, now we're in the era of post-impressionism as we get closer to the end of the 19th century.
We're getting there, yeah. So I think that with pointillism, a lot of people are swayed by Seurat's scientific theories. There's nothing really that definitive about his theories. They don't prove anything.
I mean, remember, these are painters. These are not philosophers. They're not scientists. Some of them write manifestos. They're in science is. It's almost like the new age. It's kind of like today when you go to self-help books and they get like a little pop psychology, and from that little pop psychology, they build an entire empire of thought. So it's definitely a dabbler's armchair scientist kind of world that when we talk about scientific principles in this context.
I will say, though, that I think another.
Why we use the word, it's the age of what was called positivism, where we believe that all of life can somehow be broken into scientific principles for maximum effectiveness.
Okay, another thing I think, yes, I think another
Until
thing.
I studied this in college.
You're very knowledgeable, Chris. I'm glad I'm doing the show with you. Another thing I think about pointillism is, okay, so there's a practicality to it, which is why I think Pizarro likes it. Okay, and I'm just speculating here, by the way. Now, always remember that everything I say is not very orthodox, or most of the time, unless Chris agrees.
My job is to be the orthodox. Randall's job is to be the rebel.
So the thing about pointillism is, imagine you're a painter, and to make all these, during this era, you're starting to get these synthetic colors, and you're getting them off the shelf, and you're mixing them together to get other colors. Now, pointillism comes around, and you're like, I don't have to mix my colors anymore. I can just mix them right on the canvas. So you never have to mix colors. So theoretically, you can...
And this is a big point, because artists today will still do that.
Right. And you don't have to mix colors. You can just mix them right on the canvas as you paint.
Yeah.
I mean, if something is not the right color on the canvas, you just dab some points on there.
I've watched my mom do that. It's really fascinating to watch other real painters do that. In real time, they're just trying to see what's in front of them and then what they can add to what's in front of them versus looking down. It may seem small, but it's such a big difference. It's like when you work on your computer, it's really the difference between a touch screen and a keyboard.
Yeah, and I think that for all of Seurat's theories, I think that it's the practicality that draws a lot of artists to the pointillism technique. Okay, now here is an 1887 Van Gogh. Now, what do you see here, Chris?
Oh, my word, I have to tell you, because I know Orientalism is very popular at the end of the 19th century, and many artists were trying their hand at the Japanese style. Uh, but I actually, for a minute, really thought it was straight up Japanese style because
Exactly.
it's quite remarkable. So for those of you who can't see, there's really two paintings. There's a border, a frame of what looks like lilies in the water with, I think, maybe even a bird in the background. I can't identify the bird, and some reeds. And then at the center, in a gold rectangular background, is a woman, a Japanese woman in a Japanese ornamental robe. And certainly, if we removed her from the painting, it would look like any other work by Van Gogh or any of his contemporaries. But when you look at the robe and what's going on, and they did love to paint these robes, uh, it's quite, yeah. Go on, Randall. You're gonna
Yeah,
have
I
to help
just
me with
wanted to
this.
bring this up. I just want to show this because it really shows that the influence of Japanese art, but art from all over the world is going to influence the Europeans at this time. The world at this time, the Industrial Revolution started 100 years earlier, and the world is getting smaller, and the printing press is bringing visuals of everything that exists to everybody's doorstep. And you can, I mean, you were surprised to see this, right, Chris? I was
Oh
surprised to
yeah,
see a
yeah.
painting like
Actually,
this. I mean,
even though I shouldn't be, because this was a style, it's just his ability to work so in opposition to himself, and also add, just imbue it with a little of his own style, even in her robe and facial expression.
yes. Okay, let's go on. Let's see. So here's another Van Gogh that's similar. Okay. It's similar. It's 1887. It's a Japanese themed Van Gogh again. This is from 1888. This is Paul Seurat, I
Hmm.
think.
I
Do you
don't
know
know
him?
Cirier.
Now you see, this is something you see. I was talking about the last episode with the landscaped artists, right? This is a landscape, but it almost is has departed from figurative art, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I
It's
would
not quite
guess
though.
we're looking at something over the water. Uh, it's not entirely clear what it is. Could be trees in a factory or trees in a wood. And then the other half of the painting, it's cut in half, is the reflection in the water, which is even murkier than what would be above the water.
Yeah, during this period, artists are like accidentally, you'll see this over and over. They're accidentally painting abstract art, and they either don't realize it or don't know it. Because if you look at their whole output, you see that these are accidents. They go back to quite obvious figurative art after these. So yeah, this is literally called Landscape and Trees. And then here is 1889. Uh,
Sorrow.
Pizarro. This is Pizarro's pointillist period. He's trying pointillism, you
And
see.
it looks very much like Seurat, the exception of the fact that it's a little harsher looking. There's not as much shading, but it also has a certain kind of photographic. I'm sorry for saying this. It looks like if I had a 2010 Android and I took a photo, it would look like this.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I would say that, and I've already made the argument that the Impressionists, they're trying to take photos. They're very influenced by cameras. Okay, let's go on.
And those haystacks, just for a quick return, aren't that far apart from the Monet haystacks of what would have been 20 years earlier. They're more detailed and a little refined, but they still have that certain amorphous quality to them.
Right. I mean, this is beautiful though, isn't it? I mean,
Oh, it is. It's quite lovely. It's just
Pizarro
fascinating
is
to
such
see
such a
that.
master.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on. So this is 1889, The Yellow Christ by Gauguin. What do you think about this one, Chris?
Well, this is what I love about Gauguin and living in
Am I
Tahiti is
saying his
his,
name wrong? Is it Gauguin?
it's like potato, potato, right?
Okay, go on, go
So,
on.
so Gauguin, is known for his bright, unrealistic colors. This is almost a very jaundiced Christ. But technically speaking, since Christ would have been dead, but the clothing is completely inappropriate for the period. Uh, his perspective is I, it looks, you can really see how 20th century artists will, and even late 20th century artists will take a lot of the compositional and tonal and color elements and run with this. This is actually, even though this might not be to everybody's taste, this to me looks so far like the most 20th century work we've seen so far.
Yeah, I
Now,
mean,
mind you, that's also because it's now 11 years before the 20th century.
This is 1889, and you can see Gauguin is trying to get away from mainstream art. You see how desperate he is to get away from it, but he's
I mean,
still.
this is Jesus, who everybody has always made look like larger than life, or pained, or something godlike or human. Here, it's a very, it's just another dude. He looks like just a dude with very yellow skin. Whereas the detail of the women is completely different in color, skin, and composition. They literally, their heads are bigger than half of his body, and the background is this lovely pastoral, but not a realistic pastoral at all.
Yeah, he's intentionally breaking all the rules of European painting with this painting.
Yeah.
Let's go on. This is another Van Gogh from 1889, and this is quite clearly a landscape. What do you any comments on this one?
It's almost like anime, though. Again, the colors are wild, the lines and the brushstrokes are wild. Everything is so fluid, everything is so rapid. There are people walking, and you can see that. But again, we're really getting into this more chaotic, more expressionistic tone, and further away from any kind of sense of naturalism.
In the next year after this painting, Whistler publishes his book, The Gentle Art of Making Enemies, which has the full transcript of the case. Okay, let's go on. Okay, so here is Maximilien Lucé. I think it's 1890. You see, it's another
pointillism. And this is the power of pointillism, because this is a man getting out of bed, putting on his shoes in his little one-bedroom, and it looks exactly like a photograph.
Yeah, he's trying to capture the light. I mean, it's.
I mean, this is an interesting thing when you compare it to that first work of Whistler. Whistler's detailed brushstrokes are even and soft and linear. Here you have pointillism, you have shadow, you have shade, you have all the various things, but it really does remind me of when I was a child and I would get water on the colored TV, and all of a sudden you'd see those little chromo patterns. It's so detailed. The proportionality of the man is exquisite. The proportionality of the objects is exquisite. Everything about this, doesn't it look like just a regular guy from today?
It could be a painting or a photograph with a filter, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I could put this up right now as filter art on Facebook, and if I got rid of just a few of like the furnishings, everyone would be like, "Oh yeah, I know, that's Nick."
But it shows you the power of pointillism. I mean, even Seurat didn't, I don't think, fully grasped what could be done, because of the practicality of pointillism, right? The speed at which you can mix
men's
right on
fascism
canvas.
has really been the same for 150
Hasn't
years.
changed. All right, this is
only own that shirt.
So this is Circus, I think it is, 1890, and I just wanted to show this because it really shows just how experimental artists were starting to get. Okay,
this looks like it could be a self-portrait, as if he was dressed as a saint while still keeping his Van Dyke modern beard and glasses on. It's very comical.
He's
and it's very flat.
He's painted another artist as a wizard, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on. Look at this one. This is from 1890. This is Signac, I think, a portrait of Félix Vignon.
Okay, so this is fascinating because in the first half of the right-hand half, you have a very lovely detailed pointillism. You have some mild level of elongation. Then you have this kaleidoscope background that really almost puts me in the mind of Peter Max in the 1960s. It's completely illustrative. The face, his profile is exact. The proportionality of his nose is fine. His ears, everything about him is in such beautiful detail. But then when you get away, the coat elongates, the background distorts, but it's, oh my God, it's so groovy. You can really see how in the 1950s and 60s, even right through to the 80s and 90s, this kind of color contrast is really going to take shape.
And you can really see like how, going back to even the landscape artists, 100 years earlier, the landscapes are completely abstract, right? You take away the figures, and what do you have? You have like a...
Now, this could also just been the background of a circus, so I don't really want to overinvest.
Okay, so this is unusual piece from 1891, Georges Seurat. I don't know what plaga
It
heist
looks like a
means. It's a
boat fall in the water by a beach at sunset or sunrise, but that's again not an exact. It is just an interpretation.
yeah, it's pointillist. I mean, I don't know
It
what the
has
artist.
multiple layers of colors and mixes of colors.
Yeah, I don't know what the artist intended, but it's veering to abstraction. I mean, it's
Absolutely.
but you look at this other artist's other work again. It's the same kind of thing. It's like this is an exception rather than the
And
rule.
again, this is far less detailed than what we've been looking at for a bit, and much more, again, the interplay of color, space, and line. But again, unlike even Monet, now we're getting further and further away from even out of focus into just what may or may not be, depending on how you view color, shape, and light.
And one thing that was going on with these artists, I think, and this will become important later, is like they, because they're painting fast and they're going outside and they're painting fast, they they are trying to mind their subconscious. They're just trying to be like a window to the universe and paint what they're seeing. And so they're getting whatever. Here's another Seurat, 1891. This is the Circus. It's a very famous piece.
Woman on a horse and a jester in front of her
I do
as
find
an
it
audience watches.
I do find it interesting that the other artists look at Seurat's pointillism and they say, "Wow, I can use that to make realistic work." And Seurat is just like, forget realistic work. His work is very cartoony. Okay, let's go on. Okay, do you know this one?
Yes, it's Rousseau.
That's right. It's 1891. Tiger in a Tropical Storm. Is surprised. This is very famous. Rousseau, you can see, is influenced by. Remember, I showed that African art earlier. So this is an example. He's influenced by. He's probably influenced by art from India too, which I didn't show. But
The expression of the tiger crouched in the woods, in the forest, the trees, and the grass. There's a lot of green. There's a lot of shape. It looks like it's raining very hard on the upper corner of it is gray, white streaks. And it looks as if the tiger is either frightened or about to pounce. But you are right. The drawing of the tiger's face is very reminiscent of Asian culture's drawings of tigers
right,
or dragons.
right, and yeah, let's go on. This is another Henri Rousseau, 1892. Um,
Oh, this is to celebrate the French Revolution and the beginning of the New Republic. It is people dancing around a tree, almost like a maypole.
It's very stylized. All right, let's move on. Let's see, what do we got? Okay. Now we've gotten to Gauguin. Okay, so Gauguin moves to Tahiti because he's trying to get away from Europe and the European mindset, and he just starts painting stuff he sees in Tahiti, people he sees. What do you think about this, Chris?
This is a very classic Gauguin. You have the bare-chested natives. You have his use of red. You have the outdoors. And again, it's an interesting thing because while there's detail on the people, if you look at the grass or the trees, anything else, especially the use of color and shape, it's highly unrealistic and lacking in detail. And unlike the pointless, the brushstrokes are wider, fatter, and softer.
Right. Well, like his Yellow Christ, he's just trying to get away from any kind of European conception of painting, right? I mean, we'll look at a few more of these. Let's see. So here's another one. I like this one a lot because it does seem so abstract in a lot of ways.
Again, two women similar before. The back of the woman's are very detailed, but there's flowers and there's this lush purpleness. But the background is just becomes more and more amorphous. It's more about color and shape of color than anything in particular. It's kind of neat how by doing that, their bodies become much more into contrast, but at the same time, there is a lot going on. It's just softer.
Yeah, and this is like an exception rather than a rule. The abstractness of it. Let's go on. So here is another Gauguin.
A woman, a man,
It's very similar to like a lot of things.
similar background again. The use
Yeah.
of purple, the flowers.
You see that the colors, except on the figures, aren't very. I don't know how accurate they are.
Yeah, they're not even fully shaped.
Okay, let's. Okay, so this is another one, Gauguin, 1892.
Naked
See,
woman, I think her lover at her side, lots of expression in her face, her eyes, her lips, her nose, the rings of fat around her chest. There is a little detail on whatever it is, that fabric, the red fabric next to her with a little illustration. But then again, you look over in the left-hand corner. Are you looking at sun? Are you looking at a tree? No idea. And I don't mean
uh,
that as a put. Oh, okay, yeah.
yeah, let's go
I
to the
just
next
mean
one. So this is 1893. So this is one of the most famous ones he ever painted, I think. This is Anna the
a naked woman
Javanese.
on a chair with a monkey and a pillow. And again, the chair, the woman, the monkey, the pillow have great detail, but then the background becomes again much more. It could be wallpaper because it looks like it's a more. It's an interior for certain, and it does look more like what would it be a person's apartment. It does not look rustic at all.
You can see he's got no regard for perspective, though, right?
None whatsoever.
Okay, so this is 1893 Jeanne Tarop, The Three Brides, and I'm just showing this because it's another unusual painting from the era. Um,
You have a bunch of women with very crazed hair and nuns above them, and a bell off on the left-hand side. It looks very much like animation of today. It's very surreal. It's very fanciful. There's very few colors. There's only really browns, whites, grays, and blacks.
and I just want you to
And
keep
there's
in,
no center.
and I
You're
just want
really
you,
your eye is split either to the extreme left or to the extreme right.
and I just want you to keep in mind, looking at these, that no one has ever painted an abstract painting yet, apparently.
And the bride herself, oh, that is you can't see her. Go on.
So yeah, this is Theo von Risselbergy portrait of Irma Seth,
Again, this
1894.
is where pointillism and naturalism really converge. It could easily be a photograph or a film clip of just a society woman playing violin. Uh, but again, each little point, each little part of that perspective, adding light and shadow and shade. This is actually, in my opinion, the most photorealistic of the pointillist work we've seen today.
Yeah, but yes, and you can see like in this era, you're getting both kinds of paintings right now. Everybody's experimenting. So this is 1897, The Sleepy Gypsy by Rousseau.
And this is nice because it really shows the maturity in Rousseau's work, because now the colors are flat in a good way. Like everything is smooth. You can make out the detail of the woman, the guitar, the urn, the tiger, but there's also the shapes. Even if it's flat on perspective, it's kind of beautiful in the way that the demarcation of the brownish gold, the woman that takes up so much of the attention is brought to the lower center of the painting, and then as it keeps on moving up, it just becomes stars and it fades out. It's really forces you to look at what's at the center of the composition, but it may be busy. There may be a lot of color going on in the lower half, but because it smooths out so much by the time you get to the middle of the painting, it doesn't overwhelm you.
And you can see there's probably a lot of foreign influence from outside of Europe, like indigenous art coming in,
Yes.
and Rousseau is well known, I think, for being like a primitive painter, they used to call it. This is 1897. Can you see this one, Chris? This is Where Do We Come From? What are we? Where are we going? By Gauguin. Gauguin considered this his masterpiece. What do you think about this?
This one, again, this almost reminds me of the Bruegel or any of the other great tapestries of the medieval era or the Renaissance. You see all sorts of people in various states of dress, some with each other, some alone. There's a religious figure, almost an Asian religious figure I can't make out in the background, gold, green, blue. Is that a monk praying in brown? I cannot. I'm sorry. I have to move something. We're blocking the painting. Thank you. No, it's true. It's kind of the downside of this technology. Yeah, there's a dog. I mean, it's clearly a celebration of life, And the fact of the clothing, the colors, the textures, it's so much variation all. And there in the almost center is a man holding an apple, probably like Adam, to be honest with you. Is that a couple embracing? Yeah, I'm sorry, I thought it was a monk. It's a couple embracing on the left-hand side. I'm sure there is a lot of Christian symbolism, but as I'm not a Christian or a symbolist, I cannot tell you what they
I
are.
don't know if there is. I mean, I think Gauguin is purposefully trying to get away from anything Western. I mean, um,
Okay.
let's
Again, I'm not.
see. Okay, so I just want to end. I think this is the last Gauguin, and what happens in 1903 to 1906? There's a couple of Gauguin retrospectives in Paris. Gauguin never. He kind of struggles his whole life with money and selling paintings, and these retrospectives that happen in Paris, they become really popular and influential with all these other artists, because Gauguin is like he's trying to give the Europeans a different way of seeing the world. He's one of the first primitives, they say. I mean, this is, the maybe you know more about the term, Chris, but they called them the primitivist painters because they were mimicking primitive art forms, right? I mean,
And applying a modern European sensibility.
right.
Yes.
It's a derogative term, but what it really is these other cultures that just have different ways of depicting figures that aren't photorealistic. Um, This is 1898, the Dance of the Elves at Point Aven. This is Roderick O'Connor, and you see this is a landscape, right? So we're going into, it looks almost abstract, wouldn't you say, Chris?
Yes. I
Okay.
know nothing of Roderick O'Connor, so it's just kind of interesting.
Here is okay. So this is another African piece of art. This is probably from the 1900s. Okay, I don't know. Do you want to say anything about this, Chris?
This is again, you can see really how Cubism, which is about to start, the face is in one direction, the chest is in the opposite direction, the tummy and the butt are in the opposite direction. Everything about this is twisted, and the perspective is completely off, and yet it works as a whole.
See, this is the kind of thing people like Gauguin saw, and they thought, well, I need to go to those places. um,
Certainly, Europeans at that point would be very familiar with that style, as that
okay.
would have been in the homes of very wealthy people at that time.
Okay, so how much time
Now
we got?
we're at Kandinsky. Are we ending at Kandinsky?
Uh, yes, we will.
Kandinsky seems like a very good.
I want to end here. So this is 1903. This is a piece called The Blue Rider. What do you know about this, Chris?
I know so much that I'd rather say next week we're going to tease you right now with the Blue Riders and why we're now at the very. We're literally at. Where you're looking at someone who's so associated with modernism in his least modernist work. This is what Vasily Kandinsky is at this period in history, even though he's only starting to paint at 30, he studied in his 20s. This is him really showing what he has learned from those people, both in art school and as an appreciation of art. This is when, if you've ever been a musician and you were starting out making songs and you end up copying the styles of the music you grew up with, or if you're a writer and you're starting to like make the stories that you enjoyed of your youth. This is a modernist painter who does not know they're a modernist painter yet, kind of looking back at everything we've covered in the last two episodes and trying his way by adding some unique elements in here. We'll pick up exactly here, and the Blue Rider, I can't even pronounce it as a movement, next episode, and show you pretty much, I would say, Randall, everything that we've been trying to lay down in these last two episodes. And now, so we've really gotten to the end of the road. We have now arrived at modernism.
Well, I think we're not going to get there till Kandinsky. He's going to paint the first abstract portrait.
Well, this is why I'm just saying we're at Kandinsky right now.
We'll get there. We'll get there. Yeah, but next episode, right?
Right.
Okay. Should we say goodbye then, Chris?
Then I think, folks, now that we've teased you, it's like, okay, so if we've been laying down we've been showing you exactly what modernists have been raised on, what they're trying to reflect. Now that we've shown you what's influenced them, let's show you next week or next episode what they do with all of that, how they imbue it and make it their own, and what the ramifications are, and who are the people. Now we've been dealing, right, Randall? We've been dealing with the movements and styles. Now we're going to get very specific, and basically, I would say, tell a story.
Well, we'll see. We'll see, Chris.
Okay. Well, until then, I'm Chris.
I'm Randall.
We'll talk again.
Bye.
Bye.